Who was the Zodiac killer? And the Zodiac killer is a well-known serial killer that was present in California in the 1960s. He was known for sending letters to newspapers with encrypted codes about who he is, along with letters from him. On the end of some of these notes, he drew his signature circle with a cross through it, which also showed up at many of the crime scenes. So throughout his time, the Zodiac killed at least 5 people and wounded at least 2 through the period of December 1968 to October of 1969. So the Zodiac started to send letters to newspaper companies and police stations after the second crime was committed. And in the first letter, he admitted to an earlier murder that happened about a year before. So after the letters and the murders by the Zodiac stopped in 1969, they received more letters in 1971. Then the Zodiac disappeared again until a series of letters in the spring of 1974. It seems that the main source of information about the Zodiac killer is from Robert Graysmith, who has written multiple books about who the Zodiac killer was and the murders he committed. He also, in his books, wrote about the newspaper articles with the hints and the clues that were left by the Zodiac killers in his letters. So there are many speculations about what work was the Zodiac killer and what work wasn't the Zodiac. Around minute 30 in an interview with Michael Butterfield, who is the author of the website zodiacfacts.com, he talks about a letter that he thought was possibly from the Zodiac. However, after more research and deciphering of all the letters that were written, it was shown that it was most likely not the work of the Zodiac, as it didn't fit the vocabulary and the personality of the previous letters that were sent. So it seems that there was no real way of knowing who sent in those letters based off the evidence of what we have. So when it comes to the actual crimes that the suspected Zodiac killer committed, they were done through different MOs. So the first crime was committed on December 20th of 1968, and it was the murder of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, who were 2 teens that were shot in their car in what was known as a lover's spot of Benicia, California. The second crime occurred in Vallejo, California on July 4th in 1969, and this was the murder of Darlene Corvair and the injury of Mike Magoo. They were also shot in their car. However, with this case, people believe that her ex-husband was possibly the one who committed this murder, as Darlene was scared of him and concerned with him stalking her. The third crime was committed on September 27th in 1969 at Lake Beresa in Napa, California. However, this crime, the killer approached 2 young kids outside of their car and said he was going to rob them at gunpoint, but instead he did not use his gun, he used a knife. And in this scene, he also left one of the victims alive. So within the change of these 2 crimes, between the first 2 and the third, there's a change in the weapon and the fact that he attacked them outside of his car instead of having them in the car. The final known victim of the Zodiac killer was Paul Stein, who was a cab driver that was shot the night of October 11th in 1969. From this crime scene, the killer took a piece of Stein's shirt and used it from witnesses to clear the fingerprints off of the door of the cab. However, Horan states that they are unsure when the pieces of the shirt were ripped apart, along with not knowing who may have ripped the rest of the shirt, besides the section we know that the killer used to clear the car off. So the piece that was sent to the station, they're unsure who could have ripped it. He said it could have been the killer or the first officers on the scene, a witness that was there. They have no way of knowing who could have had a piece of Stein's shirt, without just assuming it's the Zodiac. So even though a gun was used in the majority of these crimes, there are many changes that occur and don't seem to be consistent enough to qualify as one killer to commit all of these crimes. Even though the same killer may have committed multiple of these crimes, it seems that the first two were committed by the same killer and kind of have the same MO. However, the last two, besides the marking of the car, there is no real connection to the original crimes to be committed by the Zodiac killer, with the signature of killing young couples in their car at Lovers Lane known. Michael Butterfield also talks about the Zodiac's possible signature, which is the couples being in their car at lover spots. And this could also be the circle with a cross through it that shows up on his letters, as well as some of the crime scenes, however, not all of them. So I do think that the Zodiac killer was active during this time. However, I'm unsure of who it could or would be. Along with this, I don't think that this specific killer was the one who sent in all the letters. So some of the evidence seems to be pointing to someone else. Like the Zodiac was a murderer, but he wanted the attention that the Zodiac killer was getting at this time. So along with this, he states that the handwriting experts were unsure of who wrote the letters and that the suspected Zodiac killer may have not sent them. So they couldn't really agree with who the handwriting belonged to. So I think that the Zodiac killer did commit some of these. However, I think it's hard to decipher if he was the murderer in all of these crimes, which would make it hard to know who the true Zodiac killer was.